town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leapt for joy. Blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord." And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham, and to his descendants forever." So this time of year we hear all of this talk about the reason for the season. Of course, we see the signs that say Jesus is the reason for the season, and we start talking about all the commercialism, and we get fed up with all the people rushing out to buy their gifts, and all the people who are so focused on getting exactly what they want for Christmas that we start to just get completely perturbed. Some people are more vociferous than others when they throw up their banners of Jesus is the reason for the season. And some of us see those signs and we wonder, what the heck does it all mean? What do you mean that Jesus is the reason for the season? You mean this baby being born and then eventually dying for our sins? Is that what this season is all about? Or is there something that's deeper, something that connects the dots, something that completes the dash in the middle, so to speak? Maybe it's something to do with the way, something to do with us learning from who this person was and who he was and who he is and the things that he taught. Maybe it's something to do with living into the way that he taught. But in a time when we're dazzled by the lights and blinded by all the signs and the advertisements and focused on getting that last gift so that, God forbid, our kids or spouses or whomever might be disappointed with what they get. Because we've got to make sure everybody gets exactly what they want. That's what's important here. Let's not forget that. But we get so caught up in these things that we forget how to live. We miss the very small but sweet, precious, and tender moments that are right there under our noses day in and day out because we are so focused on pleasing people and on being pleased ourselves. But deeper within all of this hustle and bustle is the constant reminder as we bump into each other and rush in throngs into these stores and these mass crowds running around of the complete, distinct, magnificent effect that we have on one another. As so many people are out running around, there are so many paths that cross and intersect. And these constant reminders of the seeds that we leave with one another, sometimes very positive, sometimes earth-shattering and life-changing, transformative, sometimes very tiny and very subtle, sometimes tragic. Sometimes even when we don't intend to, we leave a horrible impression on somebody else and break their hearts, and at other times, not intending to, we bless somebody immensely when we think we're just doing things that we do every day. Nothing special for us. Transformative, subtle, profound. I've got to look at his name because it's so long. Ramon Antonio Dorado Estevez. Grew up with 9 brothers and sisters. Mother died when he was young, didn't have a lot of money, needless to say, so all of the kids had to go out and get jobs at a very young age to support the family. And so Ramon went out and in 1949 got his first job as a caddy. And all of these overprivileged people, as he called them, were talking about one another and talking behind other people's backs and talking about the important things in life, their Rolls Royces and things like that. And completely ignoring the fact that Ramon was standing there with them. He was just like a fly on the wall, completely ignored. And it occurred to him the profound effect that we could have on people when we don't even notice that they're right there. Because nobody noticed him until it was time to mark a ball or pick the right club. The rest of the time he was invisible. But all of the words that they said and all of the things that they did left an indelible impression on him and how he would be in later life as he grew up. He eventually quit that job and went to work at a theater as the boy who pulls the rope to open up the curtain on the screen. Now, this was a big money maker, right? $5 a week. And he couldn't even afford to eat on that. And so the owner of the theater, in an apologetic way, said, "I'm sorry that I can't pay you more, but there's a soup kitchen down the street. It's run by these people called the Catholic Workers, and they'll give you 5 hot meals, or 3 meals a day for 5 days a week." And that ended up being the kitchen that Dorothy Day was running. It was weird how these paths intersected. Now, he didn't recall ever actually meeting her. He didn't realize at the time who these people were, nor the impression that they, too, would leave on him as he grew up and went on in his later years. As he was working in that theater and watching all these actors on TV, he knew he wanted to work in the movies. It didn't matter what. I mean, he wasn't going to make it as an actor, but at least he could do something and travel on these sets and do something to help out. So he ended up getting such a position, and as he's traveling all these places, he went to India. And there in India, he was only there for 6 weeks. But something clicked inside of him. This group of people that they were with, the way they led such a contemplative, intentional, meaningful life, the way they looked on one another with love and compassion and taught this great way of living in which each was equally blessed, both the doer and the receiver, both acts of kindness being reflected back onto the one who was giving. And it left such an impression, and he said, "I want to learn this and learn how to live my life more meaningfully." On that set for that movie, the director, Terrence Malick, was there, and he gave him a book. He says, "I see that you are embracing the contemplative life. You need to read this book." And it was The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. And he took that book and he read it. And he just devoured it so quickly. And he was just amazed by the things in there. Something moved even deeper than when he spent his time in India. And so, through this transformative process, he eventually found himself on the next set, which was in France. And he went off to find a church that was saying something that he could understand, because he didn't speak any French. And so he ended up at the only English-speaking Catholic church that he could find, which happened to be, he found out later, the same church that Oscar Wilde was converted in. And from that point on, he decided he was going to be an activist. He was going to stand up in any way that he could for those who did not have, for the poor, for those who had injustice poured out upon them. He decided that he would be the defender of the least of these, and did go on to get arrested, I think, 60 times, and do a lot of things in protest of oppression. Well, this is a slow, transformative, subtle, but yet such a great, huge seed that grows. In other ways, the act can be very quick. For example, the hospital worker who is a patient intake specialist. And she's sitting there, and this patient comes in, and the patient is just irate, very perturbed, very upset with the entire process as she's being asked, where do you live? What's your religion? Who's your next of kin? All of these questions. She says, why do you have to ask me all these things? Let's just get this done. But the worker kept smiling. Everything's okay. And the woman finally said, look, I'm sorry. I don't live around here. I had no idea how to get here. I was trying to use my phone GPS, but the battery went out on my phone. Thank God I found the place, but I have no idea how I'm going to get home from here, because I can't even call my kids to get directions. The woman says, let me see your phone. She looks at it. She says, I have a charger here for this. She plugs it in. In that small act of kindness, the woman becomes elated and overjoyed. Oh, thank God. Now I don't have to worry about how I'm going to get home or how I'm going to contact my kids or getting lost. Thank you so much. Not knowing that this worker very well could have lashed back at her because in her life, she had left her abusive husband finally. Her 3 kids, she couldn't tell them who her father really was because she didn't want to make him look bad in front of the kids. So she became the bad guy for leaving. And her kids told her how much they hated her because she left them. Look what you're doing to me. I'm getting bad grades now because of you. I feel sick all the time and I can't sleep because of you. Everything is your fault. Everything that my father said about me, he was right. But she still maintained her composure through that, kept a smiling face, and helped this woman, this patient who had come to her, leaving this great impression that changed even her. Sometimes the impressions are dark and heavy and last through generations. You look at the Hemingway family, starting with Clarence, Ernest's dad, who committed suicide, and then Ernest, and then his brother Leicester, and then a couple of his kids. And it just keeps passing on through these generations. You look at Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes' next wife, who committed suicide in the same way that Sylvia did, and then their son, who did in 2009. Just, yes, understanding that obviously there are issues of depression and other mental health issues that are involved, but yet that act, no matter how you define it, left an impression to say that this is okay. It's okay to take a way out like this. And so it passes on from generation to generation, seeming like that in that act, I'm just escaping, not thinking about the people who are left behind and the effect that it's going to have on them. Or maybe it's tragic. Maybe it's like last Thursday night when these 3 boys started shooting up a holiday party with all these high school kids. Just people. It's a game thing. This is what we do. It's okay to go out and just shoot people at random. But Xavier Dobson was a 15-year-old football player on that high school team that was at the party. And as the gunshots started firing, everybody scurried and ran away and ran off to the porch of this house where they were having the party. But Xavier laid down over these 3 girls who had collapsed on the ground. And he was shot and killed. None of the girls was harmed at all. Not one bullet made it to them. He will leave an impression. He did. Nobody in that group is ever going to forget his name. They said that in his life he was a natural leader, a mentor. He could have affected so many lives in the days to come. But in a senseless and tragic act, he gave his life so that others might continue to live. Nobody in that group is ever going to forget him. Huge, heroic impression that he made. And then, finally, there's the worker at Qdoba. Low-wage worker, cleans up around the restaurant there in Louisville, Kentucky, cleans the tables, sometimes serves food. And this woman comes in about once a week. She doesn't get out of her house much because she can't. She has very little range of motion. She comes in her electric wheelchair, and they see her coming, and they'll open the door for her, and she comes in. And this worker had seen her before, but really not had too much interaction with her. But It brings her her food because they know what she eats. When she does come in, she gets her taco salad for lunch and she takes home a burrito for supper because she can't go out and get things. And as he starts to walk away after giving her food, he stops. He said, "Is there anything else that I can do for you?" She says, "Can you help me eat it?" Not for him to eat it, but for him to feed her, because she couldn't do it herself. And so he put on his gloves and without even thinking about it, starts feeding her. It was between him and her. But other people noticed, like the doctor who was in there for lunch and filmed it on his camera, and then started sending it out to his patients and friends who were feeling dejected. And it uplifted them and had a great effect on so many people. Those little, tiny acts of love and kindness go a long way. We have so many choices in our life, on our words, and in our actions. And when we ask ourselves, what is the meaning of this season? What is the point of all of this talk about light shining in darkness and God with us? We're reminded, I need some water. We're reminded of Elizabeth and Mary. Elizabeth, gotta have the backstory here. Elizabeth's husband, priest Zechariah, had been in the temple and he was burning the incense, and the angel Gabriel comes to him and says, "I'm going to give you a son. He is going to pave the way for the Messiah." And he said, "What you talking about, Liz? My wife is no spring chicken. She ain't having any babies." He said, Oh, you don't believe me, huh? Okay, guess what? I'm going to make you mute until the day your son is born. So shut up. And so he was. He comes out of the temple, and all the other priests are there waiting, and he can't talk. He's like, they're like, "Yeah, he's supposed to say." But they knew something had happened in there, something profound, and so when he came home, he must have been able to communicate something to his wife, because, she got pregnant. But then there's Mary, her cousin, a short distance away, who also has an angel appear to her and say, "You are going to give birth to the Messiah. You will carry God in your womb." And once again, she says, "What you talking about, Liz?" You see, you would think she would be excited. You would think she would be overjoyed that she has this great honor, but she wasn't. She was scared to death. She's a virgin. She's not married. What are people going to think about all this? And the fact that she's seeing an angel. She's wondering about her own sanity. And so she runs out of there, and she goes to Elizabeth, just freaking out. Oh my God, what's going on?" And Elizabeth comes up and says, "How blessed am I that the mother of my Lord would come to visit me." And the Spirit welled up within her as her child leapt in her womb. And Mary stops dead in her tracks and looks at her and says, "Oh my God, that's what this is about. It's real." Without that affirmation from Elizabeth, what choices would Mary have made? How would she been able to deal with the circumstances that she had? Because Elizabeth gave the response that she did, because Elizabeth believed and took on the role that she did, she reflected back this love, this radiance, this spirit that Mary took in. And her whole attitude, her whole countenance changed. She said, "People are going to call me blessed. Those who have stood over me because I'm just some simple little country bumpkin girl and have looked down on me from their places of power will be brought low. The oppression that they inflict is going to come to an end because of this child in my womb, and I would be called blessed. Wow, how the tables have turned. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for believing what I could not. Thank you for your words that inspired me. Thank you for your actions that lifted me up when I so needed it. And that same radiance then grew and welled up within Mary. She, in turn, reflected it back to Elizabeth. They were for one another the joy, courage that they both needed in that moment. So what is the reason and the meaning for this season? Well, Ramon actually said it very well later in life. Ramon, by the way, went on to become an actor, and because Ramon isn't a cool name as an actor, he changed his name to Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen was that theater worker. Martin Sheen was that caddy. And he said that knowing we are loved unites us all and gives us joy and meaning. In every act and in every word, let us show one another that we are loved. This is not only the spirit of Christmas, but the way that we are called to live our lives every day, no matter where we go, or no matter whomever we encounter, no matter how low we're feeling, because the love and the joy and the peace that we give will be reflected back to us and lift us up when we need it most. Amen. This next song, you can try to sing along, you can just listen. I shared it with